Hello everyone and welcome. This is Prakash Mohora and I am working at the Asian Human Rights Commission in Hong Kong. Today we have with us Mr. Om Prakash Thakuri, who will be discussing with Mr. Basil Fernando on what is advocacy. Mr. Thakuri is the director of the Advocacy Forum in Nepal. He has been working in the human rights field for a decade already. His expertise is in documentation and fact-finding missions and also in strategic litigation of human rights violation cases, especially torture, extrajudicial killings, and rape cases, among other human rights issues. Welcome again, Mr. Thakuri. I would now like to request Mr. Basil to start the discussion. Over to you, Mr. Basil. Thank you.
Okay, uh, we could discuss with questions from you. I will just make an introduction, and you can ask whatever questions that you wish. Then we will discuss the question.
First of all, I would like to thank to Mr. Basil for his time for this discussion meeting. So you know that this the word advocacy is very important word in the field of human right. Uh, so it's very important to discuss on this topic and to let know to all the other people who are working on the human rights sector and other issues also. So advocacy bring huge changes, if it is done properly. So it's very important to know what is advocacy and how it is done and what are the tools of advocacy, strategies of advocacy. So what is advocacy, what is non-advocacy. So I would like to know something about what is advocacy and what are the tools of advocacy and what are the strategies of advocacy, why it is important.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, let's try to get the idea of advocacy. What does advocacy mean? Advocacy, this word has now become very common, but it started, in the past with the legal advocacy. In courts, there are people who are called advocates or lawyers, and they try to do advocacy for their client. Now, what does that advocacy mean? What it means is persuasion. Trying to persuade somebody to your point of view. Now, this is the art of persuasion. Because if there are two views or more views, then one has to find the reason why one view is preferable or better than the other view. So there has to be an attempt to show, well, what I am advocating is either more true, that is what you do in the court. We are telling one party lawyer, try to tell the court that my client, what he says is more likely to be true than the other party. Example, if it is a criminal case, if the Attorney General or prosecutor says that your client has committed, let's say, robbery, and he gives some evidence, and then you try to present a contrary view that your client did not commit this offense, and you place facts and arguments to show that your client should not be treated as guilty. Now, it's a very difficult art of trying to, two parties trying to persuade a judge, one person, and give a very clear, rational explanation as to why he is more correct. Now, when it comes to advocacy in a human rights sense, of course, it is not only in courts that we do that, but we do it in society. For example, why should torture be eliminated? So some people will either say that torture doesn't exist in our country, so you don't have to bother about this. Or some others will say, well, uh, uh, we cannot prevent it because for various reasons. We have to use torture in order to get to know the truth. Now, those who are engaged in advocacy against torture has to persuade those people, opponents, as well as the society in general, that torture is something that should be eliminated from society. It should not be used. The you have to answer the arguments put by others, opponents. At the same time, that is not enough. You have to address the society to show that this does more harm than good, and this does not achieve the objectives which are good for the society. So it's a very complex, then it becomes a very complex process. Persuading, arguing against one argument against the other is not very difficult. But what is more difficult is to convince, develop social policy and persuade society that this should be done, and the torture should not happen, or it can be any other thing. Now, then we have to keep in mind what are the in the back of the mind of people. Why don't they take a side? Many people will agree that torture is bad, but they don't take a side and say that, okay, let's ask the authorities to stop this or participate in the process. So that means that we have to develop an understanding about the people. What are the objections? So it is not enough for us to keep on repeating our side of the arguments. See, one of the mistakes about human rights advocacy is some people keep on telling that this is wrong and this is for this purpose is wrong. They are giving their arguments over and over again. But the other side refuse to listen to them. However many times you say that, there isn't much result. The reason is that we have not understood what is in the mind of the other people. Why are they, not taking this into uh, uh, talking what you say into consideration. So the very important point of view is to understand your opponent's point of view. Without understanding the opponent, and we should not assume that everybody acts in bad faith. That my opponent is doing that because he is paid by for that, or he has a he's a stupid guy or something like that. We should not assume that they are all bad people. If it is bad people, only think about it. It won't remain as a social policy. Social policy remains because there are more people who are indirectly or indirectly supports them. So we have to try to get beyond our point of view and try to understand why they say like this. Then advocacy is always a process of discovery. You try to discover why certain things, wrong things happen. What are the forces behind these wrong things? How do they do that? How are your opponents able to convince the people that they are right? That is why in moving the people from one idea to the other, it is very essential to get them to your side. But that had to be done by a very serious process of reasoning and understanding. And there are yes.
So, sir, you mean that we do advocacy for with policymakers and advocacy with the community also?
Community, yeah.
Two types of advocacy. We do advocacy with policymakers, and we do advocacy with community level people also, with the community also.
Because without the community, you cannot change policy. See, if the community view changes, the policy makers will have to listen to them. That is a basic, premise that has been proved throughout history. That if, for example, let's take some examples. Now see the issue of the black people in United States. Now one time, both in United States and in England, there were industrialists and others who thought we need slaves to come from some other country if we want to get economic progress. So they organized ships. When they went there, they found people will never come on their own. They will not come voluntarily. So they have to take them by force, bring them, sometimes they are tied and various ways, and then intimidate them. And like that, they were brought to the home countries and they worked. And many people thought, and then the economy improved. For example, in United States, the cotton industry in the South America, one of their major industries was the cotton industry. And cotton industry requires a lot of physical labor. Now, when these people came, and they were doing it for nothing. Suddenly, the cotton industry became very big, and it brought a lot of money to the United States. So they became very rich. So then the rest of the society said, "Oh, this is very good because we are all benefited now. It's not only the industrialists who benefit; they will put up roads. The life standards of the people, the white people, improves. They build churches, so many things. They do cultural activities, all from the wealth that was created with the use of slave labor." Then as they go on, few people began to see this involved a huge amount of human suffering. You treat people like animals in order to get these things done. And among the black people themselves, there began to be resentment. They didn't accept it. Many of them were silently against, but they were silent. But few people become vocal. Sometimes they are killed or they get into a lot of trouble. But they are the beginning of a protest. Very small protest. But when they see, when that is heard from outside, more people begin to ask questions. Earlier, when the cotton industry is going on well, the churches, they interpret the Bible and say that even according to the Bible, it is right to have slaves. They make hymns, songs, say that God has made the world like that. But then there are other people who begins to challenge that. So you get a many frontal criticism against this practice. It is not one front. Advocacy cannot be done merely on a one front. It is many fronts. The churches, the theologians begin to say, no. God cannot say that. God will never say that. God treats everybody are God's children. So a black man, white man is not a difference that God will recognize. And God wants these people to be treated in the same way as we treat ourselves. So in the theological front, on the one hand, this is going on. On the other hand, the socially, political parties, which want to get support from the rich, they are opposed to abolition of the discrimination of the slavery. Then others develop political parties and say no. They say this is wrong and this should. So there is a debate spread into the society. So then into that, specialized groups develop who are devoting themselves entirely to promote the interest of the black people. They were called abolitionists. That is, those who want to abolish slavery. So they hold meetings everywhere. They did many things. When a black slave escaped from their slave master and come to some other place, that is a criminal offense. He could be arrested and punished, and then given back to the owner, because their free will was not recognized. So then there were people who put up safe houses. When a slave escapes some place, they organize, they go underground, and the people look after them. They give food, they give places to stay. They arrange them to go to a place where the law is different. If they go to Canada or even North America, law says slavery is wrong. So slave can go and live in another part of the country. So these people help. They everywhere they conduct meetings. They have they publish newspapers. And like that, huge amount of work is done in order to promote a particular cause. So in the process, the community, now we are coming back to the idea, the original problem, community. The community get their views change. They begin to more and more to see, yeah, there is something wrong. And once you have the majority, more people think in that way, then you have the path to change. But the change doesn't happen all of a sudden in one piece, one day. So there will be a small law which says which abolish penalties for escaping in some other part of the country, so that they could come into those areas. Like that, many small changes happen, and gradually, then the path is made for a big change. Now we are talking about a very big change. Now this is not a small advocacy. This is really a very big issue. So then when South America wanted slavery because it brought in a lot of money. Their economy depended on that. The North America, where there was more Christian influence, they were opposed to it. And when they were debating like that, the slave owning states said that we are going to separate from you. We cannot stay together because you all are opposed to slavery, and we will be a separate country. So then the other side say that under no circumstances we will allow the union to break. The whole country should remain one. Now, even then, there was no real strong position on the slavery being abolished altogether. One side is more in favor of that, the side opposed to that. Then in the midst of a civil war, the North is really faced with the South, and they realize that they need the support of the blacks. So at that point, Abraham Lincoln, he declares that if the civil war is won, then he unilaterally he abolishes the slavery everywhere. It becomes a crime. Owning a slave is declared as a crime. It is abolished. And thereby, the black people joined in the struggle for keep the union, and the union was kept. But then you can see the advocacy, what the meaning of advocacy. It means, not just to be saying few things and expecting that things will change. You must have a comprehensive view as to who is opposing, why they are opposing, and how to get to the people. And explaining people and, thereby getting their consent, improving their consent for a change. If you go into anything, it is like that. The modern women's movement is another example of how far changes can be brought about. When people begin to, the stages are like this. Some people begin to speak out about what is wrong that is happening to them. That's the first step. when a few people begin to talk out and say this is wrong, this is what is happening. So there were among the women few people who said when they were raped, they started fighting. Or when their husbands started dealing very badly, and or they were not given jobs, or when they're given jobs, they were paid very much lower salaries, wages. So few people begin to speak out. Sometimes for some period, they are isolated. And then some other people join in. So gradually there is expansion of the cause and more reasons given to the people as to why it is wrong. And this very often has to be giving new evidence. That's the important point. The advocacy is always evidence-based. If you say that, say, torture should be abolished, you must be able to say how many torture victims how many people are tortured more or less in a country, say for example, here. Maybe at the beginning you cannot get the whole number. But suppose this year you say it's 10, but then you find out with more work, in fact, that you get to know about 100. And then you get to know about more. So this is your evidence. So evidence collecting process is very essential to advocacy. So you record everybody. Documentation become important thing, because every case where there is torture, if you begin to record that, you get it from the victim or their close person, to begin to collect as much evidence as possible, like that in as many people as possible. Little by little, you can answer the arguments by others. For example, main argument is, it's a very small problem, it is happening to few people. So if it is only happening to few people, the community as a whole, it doesn't get very deeply involved. But if you are able to say this is widespread, but it is not enough to say that. You must be able to show that. So showing rather than saying. That's the important principle of advocacy. To show. This is how things are happening. So a lot of time must be devoted to gathering information, documentation, and nowadays, of course, you have many methods of doing that. You can take photographs, and the photographs are very powerful medium. So the more you see, that more people believe. That is again we go into general questions. How do people get to believe something? The belief is by when you see more and more something around, you see it, and then people believe. So that's the first part. The evidence-based, training. So to do this, you have to train people. You have to train your own people how to collect this information and how to use that. Then second part is publicity, communication. See, however much evidence you have, if it is in your own office, it is not going to influence people. So you have to find ways of getting that out, getting it out to the people to the society at large, more evidence there is, more people will take interest on the issue. Say, for example, at the beginning, you have, you are able to say, some journalists, now don't listen to us. We are activists. You don't listen to us. You come and listen to these victims. And then you expose them to a number of victims. And the journalist directly interviews them. And then the journalists get convinced that this is true. Then when the journalists change their mind, they give little more space in their journals. When people see that this is taking a social notice, now the problem, which was only taken private notice in the past, very few people get to know privately, but now it is getting socially noticed. More people begin to come out and say, I'm also a victim. So that is how you break the silence of the victim. More people begin to come forward and to talk, and there are records of this being made and publicized, then it becomes a generalized voice. It gets ever more expanded. Now you see, if you go back to the black issue again, now this time when a policeman started beating George Floyd, they put their foot on the neck of that man, and man died, and somebody took a photograph, and that provoked a global protest. And a lot of people who know about this thing, he said in recent times, the biggest protest in the United States was provoked by this. It went far beyond the period of Martin Luther King. During the Martin Luther King's time also there were a lot of protests, but now this time it was a widespread protest. And that is how the advocacy and protest get linked. See, you can ask, what is the purpose of advocacy? Purpose of advocacy is to make silent issues vocal. Invisible suffering to be made visible. The sufferings of various people goes on invisibly. Society doesn't see it. And there are lots of people who are not affected by these things. They don't see the thing at all. So how to make these hidden realities, bring them to surface, and people begin to.
Sorry, I had this question already, but I was waiting to ask you, why advocacy? What is for? What is the advocacy for? So it is like a purpose of advocacy. So you were interested. So I had that in my mind. Why advocacy? Why do we do advocacy? So please.
Yeah. So advocacy is there in order to bring about change. See, we don't wait and say that someday things will change. Advocacy is an intermediary stage from the recognition of something that is wrong or something that is suffering to a point where we, by a gradual process, we change social policies, and we try to bring that issue to be remedied by the society in that problem. Of course, it doesn't change completely overnight. It's a gradual process. But more and more recognition, social recognition to the problem, thereby slowly bring about change in the way that we treat people, the change of attitudes of people. Somebody will say, oh, black, blacks are fools. Those days, that is how they were to say. They say, why are they, treated like that? Because they're fools. But today, nobody will say that. Today, people have seen that they have as much intelligence as anybody else, sometimes more intelligence than many others. So these, the women, they thought women are good only for bringing children and looking after children. How can they do these jobs? How can they do responsible jobs? That is how one time they thought. But by gradual work, gradual advocacy, now it has been, nobody make that kind of objection. Nobody who is educated will make that kind of objections.
It has become normal now.
Yeah. So by a gradual process to change attitudes, then change practices. In the black issue, those days when the blacks get into a bus, they are not given a seat. If they are seated, somebody will drag them out. And if you see the Gandhi film, Mahatma Gandhi famous film, you find that he is going in a first class train as a barrister. He is dragged out of that and thrown out of the running train. Today, nobody will do that because the attitudes, the things have changed, and now if they do that, they will get into serious trouble. So the attitude change, the practices change, and finally the law change. The change of the law is not the first step, and that is why the human rights organizations often go wrong. They think if you advocate the law to be changed, the law will be soon changed. Laws doesn't get changed like that. Laws get changed only when there is a mass demand. There's a demand from the community. When the people reject certain ways of doing things, it is at that point that the laws change. So just to say that we are trying to change the law and have some meetings, that is not the way to bring about change. You have to work within the community, with more people, and we have to go through this whole process of how to create societal discourse. Ultimately, the purpose of advocacy is to create societal discourse in favor of of a change that you are advocating. So it's a very complex process, but today there are lots of means of doing that. And one means of doing that is today also is provided plentifully with the the internet. So today you can talk to a victim who is living far away with the help of somebody who will ask them, can conduct an interview over the telephone or over the Skype or even by Zoom. And when we do that, you are able to record it. You are able to take the photographs. So today, if you really want to put up some effort, it is possible to do this. If in the earlier years, it took long years, today you can do it faster. One time, even to get a report from one country to another, it took months or sometimes years. because they had to depend on ships and things like that. But today, we can now, you and I can talk from two countries. You are in one country and I'm in another country, and we are able to be discussing like this. So we must make use of these technological facilities, improve our conversations in society on the matters we want. But for that, we must have a lot of evidence. It has to be evidence-based. Just to say that
You mean
something
that
is
we
wrong
need
is
to?
not going to change.
You
Yes,
mean that we need to use the facilities of social medias
yeah,
for social changes?
that's right.
So use social medias, and like people go on the street after they find that something is wrong, go on the street and they demonstrate, they demand something. Is that a form of advocacy, or it's something
Yeah,
different from advocacy?
it is part of advocacy, but you have to be very careful about that, because sometimes even before other work is done, easiest thing is to get some people. Often the people who come are the people who usually go for these things. There are people who will come for any protest because you call them and they will come and they are ready to protest. But that is not an indication that society is participating in the protest.
Yeah.
See, that's the difference. So the first thing should be doing the groundwork. Of course, a protest should be there always. If a man is beaten up, even if 10 people gather there and to protest, that is good, because that gives morale. But we should not treat it as the end. Many people do a protest, and that is the end. Come to the streets, they say a few slogans, and they go home, and they think that we have done something, and that's it. But it should be combined with lot of groundwork, and with the idea. Important thing is to influence those who do not come readily for these meetings. It is that which will make the change. You should go to the community to such an extent that community begin to participate. And in your country, there are few instances where it happened. For example, when the king was overthrown, it was an effort in the whole country, not some few people who are protesting. So the same with the black movement now in United States, England, and Europe. Lots of ordinary people come and participate. But we should not make something like, have the protest. If you have a protest meeting and now we have done something, and change will come. It won't come like that. It is only a very small part of a beginning. The important part is gradually more and more people join, either they come to the street or not. They started joining and it can be felt. Governments and others begin to feel this is not something that can be ignored. That is the point. Ultimate aim of advocacy is to make an issue to the forefront that it cannot be ignored. The government, those who are in power, begin to say this: if we ignore this, this will go against us. If the topmost layer on power don't change because things are good, it's a better idea. They will change only when they see if we ignore this, we will have bad consequence to ourselves. So that
Yeah.
has to be kept very deeply in mind. If you are ignored, it means you are not heard. So you have to struggle the way to get yourself, in a position that they cannot ignore you. See, that is why they say there's a big debate about whether Emperor Asoka of India, whether he became a Buddhist or what really happened. We know that at a certain stage, after he achieved being emperor, he became an advocate for Buddhism. So people ask, why did that happen? Is it because he suddenly realized that Buddhism is a better religion than the others? The historians say that is not the reason. He began to see almost everybody is turning to Buddhism in terms of moral values. And if I ignore that, then I'm not a good king. I will not be treated as a good king, and it may even affect my future. So he couldn't ignore. It's the same thing, the black issue could not be ignored anymore. Women's issue throughout the world, it cannot be ignored anymore. So in developed countries, torture is an issue that they cannot ignore. You can't say that a policeman will beat her. They have come to that point, but we have not come to that point. So we have to bring it to an extent that it cannot be ignored. Then the changes will come like a fruit it's not that change, we bring about change. Change comes merely as a natural product. But the first part is the difficult part. Farming is the difficult part. Watering the plant, looking after the plant, that is the difficult part. And getting it to grow, but then the right time, the fruit will come.
So I have a query. How advocacy is different from lobby? Is it same that like we say lobby and advocacy, which come together in human right works? We say that we do lobby and advocacy. Is it same thing or it's a little bit different?
It is related but different.
Mm-hmm.
See, lobby is when we are in a position, go to people who have power and who have some influence in the power. And we go and tell them, explain to them certain things and try to get their support. So we may go and meet a minister, we can go and meet even the prime minister, or we may meet ambassadors, various people who can bring some pressure on those who are in power to bring about certain changes. So that's a branch of advocacy. But first of all, when you go there, people will ask, well, what support you have? Who are you? What is the support you have? So that building that support and the groundwork and all that is the first part. But meanwhile, say for example, if it's an individual case, we can go and lobby easily. We can go and say so and so is, unfortunately kept in detention without any reason. Or somebody has been beaten up, please take up that case. Of course, you don't expect a big change. You expect that individual will get some relief. So that kind of lobbying is one type. Lobbying for change of law, lobbying for allocation of funds, or in order to that there will be reforms, because reforms always involve funds. And allocation of funds for changes, these are bigger issues. And there the lobby will depend very much on the extent of your support group. Then they will be able to take that up. But lobbying is an important thing. Whenever you can, but not to trust so much. There are some people who spend all their money and they go to UN for some meetings and meet up with some people for a few minutes and come back and say they said that we did lobbying. Now that kind of lobbying doesn't work. Today you can just send a letter, without going all that way. But if you have already worked on certain things and you have already built some support, not just one person, many people in the UN setting to support you, then that is worth. And today's lobbying itself can be, can be done with these technological changes. If you want, you can lobby the UN rapporteur every day. Every case you take and you write, and we did that. For one time, long time, we did that. Every case we sent to him. So even the idea of lobbying has changed a lot with the technology.
We do international advocacy also.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, in the human rights field, human rights works, the role of international advocacy is very important. So, for first, we need to pave the ground at national level, at the ground level, collect evidences, and do lobby and advocacy at the national level. And if it doesn't work, then we need to move to international community for international lobby and advocacy. So, in the human rights field, how important is the international lobby and advocacy? How does it play? How does it work? And its importance.
Well, it depends on the each country. For example, some countries are willing to listen to the international community for various reasons. Maybe some of its leaders have realized that these international bodies are, trying to do some good. So therefore, it is better to keep a good relationship. Others may think that it is a good thing to have a good name internationally. So therefore, asking listening to them and working with them creates a good impression for the country, good for the prestige of the leaders and prestige for the government. But there are several other countries who have determined that we are not going to listen. So at that point, the international advocacy becomes useful only if we are able to provide very strong evidences and get them to move in a big way. But international intervention is not as effective these days as some years ago. One time there was cooperation. There was a greater cooperation. But later, some of the countries which were supporting the UN and UN mechanisms themselves went against the UN system, like United States, for example. See, it was effective during the time of Cold War. During the Cold War, there was the fear that if there are a lot of problems in a country, people may turn to communist parties, and these countries can go communist. So to avoid that, a lot of attempts were made and a lot of assistance was given to many countries in order that they will not go to the other side. They will remain supporters of the UN systems. They will not become going to the Soviet bloc or But when the Cold War was over, the Western countries became less interested in human rights. as a result, today they have lost a lot of strength they had in the past. So this is something that we have to raise as together with them. They are losing influence mainly because they were not really coming to help the people who had human rights problems. So we should not, immediately help that big things will happen from that side. Even the rapporteurs and all these people are very often now much more discouraged. They don't get the support they need from the international community. Maybe this time will pass. Maybe there will be a better system, these things in the time to come. But at this time, you have to do a lot of work if you want to get their support. But once again, you can use the internet or all these facilities for international advocacy also, because if you provide to large international audiences the condition of your country, condition of torture, condition of various things, there will be support from not by the governments but by other organizations. Now, civil society, international civil society is much more important factor now. There is such a thing. In the past, international civil society did not play very much of a role in these matters, but now that setup is much more stronger. So if you provide the information by using of various methodologies available in the internet, like the YouTube and all that, you make a case out for yourself. So then the UN agencies will be questioned about what they are doing about it.
I think, thank you for today's discussion. It's almost 1 hour.
Yeah.
So I think we will continue in future.
Oh, sure.
On different topics. Yeah.
Yes, depending on you.
Yes, thank you very much. And then we will see if there is anything else for the future discussion. We can plan it out also.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Later.
Thank you.
Okay, wish you all the best for the advocacy forum.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.